Officer, I work for a federal agency. I was on an emergency work call. Can you contact my office to confirm?
I need to understand the situation here first.
Please just call my office. They're 2 miles from here. This is taking valuable time.
I need to complete my investigation properly. I'm requesting to verify what you're telling me.
The FBI's Atlanta field office at 3000 Flowers Road was less than 2 miles from where Officer Austin Morrison pulled over a black Chevrolet Tahoe on Interstate 85 for distracted driving. Close enough that a single radio call would have verified the driver's identity within 60 seconds. But Morrison's 73 days on the job hadn't taught him to verify credentials before making assumptions about who was lying and who was telling the truth. When Special Agent in Charge Julian Palmer explained he was FBI handling an active kidnapping case and showed his official badge and ID, Morrison's racial bias processed the information as black man, expensive vehicle, too perfect story, fake credentials, probable impersonation. He refused Palmer's request to call the FBI office, dismissed his explanations about the emergency call's performance, and interpreted his increasingly angry insistence that Morrison was making a career-ending mistake as threatening behavior from someone who needed to be controlled through force. What Morrison didn't know was that Palmer had spent 27 years earning the credentials Morrison was calling fake, that the sergeant Morrison thought was an accomplice was actually his own supervisor, Sergeant David Chen, responding to a call from the FBI about their SAC being detained, and that his refusal to spend 60 seconds on verification before handcuffing a senior federal law enforcement official would result in immediate termination, criminal prosecution, and a case study in how rookie overconfidence plus racial bias can destroy a career in a single traffic stop. Before we go further, what city or country are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. We love seeing where you're tuning in from. If you believe that federal credentials deserve verification, not dismissal, then hit the like and subscribe button here on JPTV. Julian Palmer's phone rang at 9:47 a.m. while he was driving south on Interstate 85 toward the FBI's Atlanta field office in Brookhaven. He was 54 years old, the special agent in charge of the Atlanta field office, a position he'd held for the past 6 years after 21 years working his way up through the bureau. He'd started as a field agent in the Criminal Investigative Division, worked organized crime cases in New York, counterterrorism in Washington, D.C., and violent crimes in Chicago before being promoted to supervisory roles and eventually being appointed to lead one of the FBI's largest field offices. The call was from his deputy, Angela Hayes, and the urgency in her voice told him this wasn't routine. "Sir, we have a developing situation on the child abduction case from yesterday. The suspect's vehicle was just spotted on traffic cameras heading toward the state line. We need your authorization to coordinate with Georgia State Patrol for an interstate pursuit and potential vehicle stop." Palmer had been following the case closely, a 6-year-old girl taken from her front yard in Marietta 2 days ago. Amber Alert issued, whole office working around the clock to find her. If they had a solid lead on the suspect's vehicle, they needed to move fast before he crossed state lines and complicated jurisdiction. "What's the confidence level on the vehicle ID?" Palmer asked, holding his phone to his ear while driving. He knew it was technically a violation to talk on the phone while driving in Georgia, but this was an emergency that couldn't wait the 8 minutes it would take him to reach the office. "High confidence, partial plate match, vehicle description matches, and the driver fits the suspect profile. We need to move now if we're going to intercept before he hits the Alabama line." "Authorized. Coordinate with State Patrol and get our tactical team ready for support. I'll be in the office in 10 minutes. "Copy that. Also, sir, Sergeant Chen from Atlanta PD called asking about the Joint Task Force meeting this afternoon. Should I confirm?" Palmer had worked extensively with Sergeant David Chen, a veteran supervisor with Atlanta PD, who coordinated frequently with the FBI on cases involving local and federal jurisdiction. Chen was professional, competent, and one of the better liaisons Palmer had worked with in his career. "Yes, confirm. 3 p.m. in the conference room. We'll brief them on..." That's when Palmer saw the blue lights in his rearview mirror. A patrol car, lights flashing, clearly pulling him over. He muttered under his breath because the timing couldn't be worse. But he also understood he'd been on his phone while driving, and a traffic stop was legitimate even if inconvenient. "Angela, I'm being pulled over. I'll call you back in 5 minutes. Move forward with the authorization and keep me updated." He ended the call, put on his turn signal, and pulled onto the shoulder of I-85 near the Brookhaven exit. He put the Tahoe in park and reached for his credentials in the center console, his FBI badge in its leather case, and his official special agent in charge identification card with his photo, name, and title clearly printed. Officer Austin Morrison had been on patrol for exactly 73 days, having graduated from the police academy in late August and started his solo patrol assignment in early September. He was 26 years old, eager to prove himself, and focused on building his daily activity numbers to show his supervisors he was productive and engaged. His training officer had told him to look for easy violations, speeding, distracted driving, equipment violations, and write tickets to establish a record of police work. When Morrison spotted the black Tahoe with a driver holding a phone to his ear, he saw a clear distracted driving violation and an opportunity to make a stop that would count toward his daily productivity. He activated his lights and followed the Tahoe as it pulled over professionally onto the shoulder. Morrison didn't notice that the Tahoe had government plates. He didn't consider that the driver might be law enforcement or emergency services on an official call. He just saw what his limited experience had trained him to see, a violation that needed enforcement. He approached the driver's window with his hand near his weapon, his body cam recording everything. When Palmer rolled down the window, Morrison saw a black man in his 50s wearing a suit and immediately made assumptions shaped more by bias than by evidence. "License and registration," Morrison said without preamble. Palmer kept his hands visible on the steering wheel, his credentials in his right hand. "Officer, I'm FBI, Special Agent in Charge Julian Palmer. I was on an emergency call about an active kidnapping investigation. I apologize for being on the phone while driving, but it was an operational emergency that couldn't wait." He held up his credentials, the badge, gold and official, the ID card laminated with the FBI seal, his photo and his title clearly visible. Morrison took the credentials and looked at them with immediate suspicion. The badge looked too perfect, too official, like something purchased online. The ID card had too many security features, which in Morrison's inexperienced judgment meant it was probably a sophisticated fake. "This is a very official-looking badge," Morrison said, his tone suggesting disbelief rather than respect. Palmer recognized the edge in the officer's voice and felt concern start to build. "It's official because I'm the special agent in charge of the Atlanta FBI field office. My office is at 3000 Flowers Road, less than 2 miles from here. You can call and verify my identity if you have any questions." A lot of people impersonate federal agents. These badges can be bought online. Palmer kept his voice calm and professional despite his growing frustration. "Officer, I understand you need to verify. Please call the FBI Atlanta field office. Ask for the special agent in charge. They'll confirm I'm Julian Palmer and I'm currently on my way to the office." Morrison looked at Palmer, at the expensive Tahoe, at the suit that seemed too nice, and his bias told him this was exactly what an impersonator would say. Have a whole story ready, seem confident, try to intimidate with a high-ranking title. "What's your driver's license number?" "It's on my FBI identification. Officer, I really need to get to my office. We have an active child abduction case and I just authorized a multi-agency response. Please just call the field office and verify. It'll take 60 seconds. Morrison heard the insistence as suspicious urgency, the kind of desperation someone shows when they're lying and need to get away before the lie unravels. "Step out of the vehicle, please." Palmer felt his professional composure start to crack. "Officer, I've shown you my credentials. I've explained the emergency. I'm asking you to verify my identity through official channels. What's your name and badge number?" "Officer Austin Morrison, badge 5847, and I'm asking you to step out of the vehicle for further investigation." "Investigation of what?" "I'm FBI. I showed you my badge and ID." "Call my office." Palmer pulled out his phone and dialed Sergeant Chen's direct number, knowing that Chen worked with FBI regularly and could vouch for him immediately. Chen answered on the second ring. "David, it's Julian Palmer. I've been pulled over on 85 near Brookhaven by one of your officers who thinks my FBI credentials are fake. Can you come to this location and verify my identity?" Morrison watched Palmer make the call and assumed it was to an accomplice who would show up pretending to be a police sergeant, exactly the kind of sophisticated impersonation ring he'd been warned about in training. "Sir, end that call right now." "I'm calling his supervisor to come verify who I am." Palmer's voice was rising now, frustration and urgency combining into anger. "End the call or I'll consider it obstruction." Palmer kept the phone to his ear. David, I'm at mile marker 89 southbound. The officer's name is Austin Morrison. Please get here as soon as possible before this gets worse. Morrison made a decision. This person was refusing to comply, making suspicious calls, and showing behavior that suggested he was involved in something criminal. The elaborate FBI story was clearly a cover, and Morrison was going to do his job and investigate properly regardless of how official the fake credentials looked. Sir, put the phone down and step out of the vehicle. Last warning. And Julian Palmer, who'd spent 27 years serving in the FBI, who'd worked cases across the country, who currently led an office of over 400 agents and support staff, realized with sinking certainty that he was about to be arrested by a rookie cop who couldn't see past his skin color and his expensive vehicle to recognize that maybe, just maybe, the FBI credentials were real and a simple verification call would confirm everything. Palmer got out of the Tahoe slowly, his hands visible, his FBI badge still in his left hand. He was trying to stay calm despite the anger building in his chest because he had an active kidnapping case that needed his attention, and he was standing on a highway shoulder being treated like a criminal by a cop who'd been on the job for less than 3 months. Officer Morrison, I'm asking you one more time to verify my credentials. Call the FBI field office. The number is public. Ask for the special agent in charge, and they'll tell you I'm Julian Palmer, and I'm on my way to work right now. Morrison took Palmer's FBI badge and examined it like he was looking for obvious signs it was fake. These can be purchased online for a few $100s. I've seen cases where people impersonate federal agents to commit crimes. I'm not impersonating anyone. I am FBI. I've been with the Bureau for 27 years. My office is 2 miles from here. Just make the call. Your story is very detailed. That's exactly what someone would prepare if they were planning to impersonate a federal agent. The more elaborate the story, the more suspicious it is. Palmer stared at Morrison in disbelief. You think my story is too good, so that makes it fake? Do you hear how ridiculous that sounds? Sir, I need you to calm down and stop being aggressive. I'm not being aggressive. I'm frustrated because you won't do basic verification. You're wasting time on an active case because you can't pick up a phone. Morrison's hand moved to his handcuffs because Palmer's raised voice and obvious anger were exactly the signs of someone who was guilty and getting desperate. I'm going to need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back. You're arresting me? For what? For impersonating a federal officer and for obstruction during my investigation. Palmer pulled out his phone again and called Angela Hayes at the FBI office. She answered immediately because she'd been waiting for him to call back about the kidnapping case authorization. Angela, call Sergeant Chen at Atlanta PD right now. I'm being detained on I-85 by a rookie officer who thinks I'm impersonating FBI. Get Chen here immediately and tell him to bring someone who can verify my identity. Morrison grabbed for Palmer's phone. I told you to stop making calls. Palmer pulled the phone away, still talking to Angela. Officer Austin Morrison, badge 5847, mile marker 89 southbound on 85. Get someone here now. Morrison made his decision. He grabbed Palmer's arm and spun him around, forcing him against the side of the Tahoe. Palmer didn't physically resist, but he kept protesting verbally, kept insisting this was a mistake, kept demanding that Morrison verify his identity. You're making a career-ending mistake, Palmer shouted as Morrison pulled his arms behind his back. I'm the FBI special agent in charge. You're arresting a federal law enforcement officer. That's what you keep saying. We'll sort out the truth at the station. The handcuffs went on, cold metal closing around Palmer's wrists, and he felt the complete wrongness of the situation settle over him. He was a federal law enforcement officer with nearly 3 decades of experience, being arrested by a rookie who'd been on patrol for 73 days. A car slowed down as it passed, the driver staring at the scene. Rebecca Santos was heading to work when she saw the police stop and noticed that the man being handcuffed was in a business suit and seemed to be arguing that he was law enforcement. Something about it looked wrong to her, so she pulled over onto the shoulder about 50 yards ahead and started recording on her phone. Morrison walked Palmer back to the patrol car and put him in the back seat, still handcuffed. Palmer sat there watching the clock on the patrol car's dashboard tick from 10:03 to 10:05 to 10:07. The kidnapping case was moving forward without him. His team needed his direct authorization for certain tactical decisions, and he was sitting in handcuffs in the back of a rookie cop's patrol car because that rookie couldn't be bothered to make a single verification call. At the FBI field office 2 miles away, Angela Hayes was on the phone with Sergeant David Chen, explaining the situation. Chen's response was immediate and alarmed. He arrested Julian Palmer? SAC Palmer? Is Morrison out of his mind? Apparently he thinks the credentials are fake. Can you get there and straighten this out? I'm leaving right now. Keep your phone on. Chen grabbed his keys and ran to his patrol car, already knowing this was going to be a disaster. He'd worked with Palmer for 5 years on joint task forces in major cases. Palmer was one of the most respected federal law enforcement officials in Georgia, and some rookie with less than 3 months on the job had just handcuffed him on the side of I-85. Back at the traffic stop, Morrison was running Palmer's driver's license through the system. It came back valid, registered to an address in Buckhead, no warrants, no violations. But Morrison was convinced the license was part of the fake identity, so clean records just meant the impersonation was sophisticated. Palmer sat in the back of the patrol car and tried to control his anger because losing his temper wouldn't help. But he couldn't stop thinking about the fact that a rookie cop had decided his FBI credentials were fake based on nothing but bias and inexperience. At 10:12, a patrol car with lights flashing pulled up behind Morrison's vehicle. Sergeant David Chen got out and walked toward Morrison with an expression that mixed fury and disbelief. Morrison saw his sergeant approaching and felt relieved because now he'd have backup to help process this impersonation case properly. Chen walked straight past Morrison to the patrol car where Palmer sat in the back seat. He opened the door and saw the FBI's special agent in charge sitting in handcuffs, and his face showed he couldn't believe what he was looking at. "Sir, I'm getting you out right now. I'm so sorry about this." Morrison walked over, confused. "Sarge, this guy is impersonating FBI. He's got fake credentials and..." Chen turned to Morrison with an expression of pure rage. "That's not this guy. That's Special Agent in Charge Julian Palmer. He runs the FBI's Atlanta field office. And you just arrested him based on what exactly?" Morrison's confidence started to crack. "He was on his phone while driving, and when I stopped him, he claimed to be FBI, but the badge looked fake." "The badge looked fake? Did you call the FBI office to verify?" "No, but..." "Did you call anyone to verify his identity before you handcuffed a federal law enforcement official?" "He seemed suspicious and..." Chen uncuffed Palmer and helped him out of the patrol car. Palmer straightened his suit jacket with as much dignity as he could manage and looked at Morrison with cold fury. "Officer Morrison, you just arrested the head of the FBI's Atlanta office during an active kidnapping investigation because you decided my credentials looked too official to be real. You refused to make a single verification call. And you're about to learn exactly how badly you just destroyed your own career." Sergeant Chen pulled Morrison aside while Palmer made calls to his office, and Chen's voice was low and shaking with barely controlled anger. "How long have you been on the job, Morrison?" 73 days, sir." 73 days. And in those 73 days, did anyone teach you to verify credentials before arresting someone claiming to be federal law enforcement? "I thought the badge was fake. It looked too perfect." "Too perfect? It's an official FBI badge issued by the federal government. What exactly were you expecting it to look like?" Morrison had no answer because the reality of what he'd done was starting to sink in. Chen pulled out his phone and called the FBI field office, putting it on speaker so Morrison could hear. "FBI Atlanta, how may I direct your call?" "This is Sergeant Chen, Atlanta PD. Can you confirm the identity of your special agent in charge?" "Special agent in charge, Julian Palmer. Would you like to speak with his office?" "Can you describe him for me?" "African-American male, 54 years old, been with the Bureau 27 years. Is there a problem, Sergeant?" Chen looked at Morrison with disgust. "One of my officers just arrested him on I-85 for impersonating a federal agent." There was a long pause on the other end. "You're telling me someone arrested SAC Palmer?" "Yes, we're handling it now." Chen ended the call and pulled up the FBI's website on his phone, navigating to the Atlanta field office leadership page. He turned the screen toward Morrison. The page showed Palmer's official photo, his title, his biography listing his 27 years with the FBI, his previous positions, his education, his specializations. The man in the photo was identical to the man Morrison had just handcuffed. "That's him," Morrison said quietly. "That's the man I arrested." "Yes, that's the special agent in charge of the FBI's Atlanta field office. The man you handcuffed is one of the highest-ranking federal law enforcement officials in the state of Georgia." Palmer finished his call and walked over to them. His suit was wrinkled from being pressed against the patrol car. His wrists had red marks from the handcuffs, and his expression showed cold, controlled fury. "Officer Morrison, I want you to understand exactly what you did today. I was coordinating a response to an active child abduction case. A 6-year-old girl was taken from her front yard 2 days ago, and we had just located the suspect's vehicle heading toward the state line. I was on the phone authorizing a multi-agency pursuit when you pulled me over." Morrison's face went pale. "Sir, I didn't know." "You didn't know because you refused to verify. I showed you my FBI badge and identification. I told you my office was 2 miles away. I asked you repeatedly to call and verify my identity. You refused every request because you had decided that a black man in an expensive vehicle couldn't possibly be who he said he was." Chen pulled Morrison's body cam footage and played it back on his phone. The video showed everything. Palmer calmly presenting his credentials, Morrison calling them fake, Palmer asking for verification, Morrison refusing, Palmer explaining about the kidnapping case, Morrison dismissing it all as an elaborate lie. The audio captured Morrison saying, "These badges can be bought online, and your story is too detailed to be believable." "You see that?" Chen said, pointing at the screen. "That's a federal officer showing you legitimate credentials, and you calling them fake. That's you refusing to do basic verification. That's you arresting someone during an active federal investigation." Palmer's phone buzzed with a text from Angela. The kidnapping suspect had been intercepted by Georgia State Patrol, and the child had been recovered safely. But the operation had proceeded without Palmer's direct oversight during critical moments because he'd been handcuffed in a patrol car. "The child is safe," Palmer said, relief and anger mixing in his voice. "No thanks to Officer Morrison here." Chen looked at Morrison. "Give me your badge and your weapon. You're suspended, effective immediately pending investigation." Morrison's hands shook as he removed his duty belt and badge, handing them to Chen. His career had lasted 73 days, ending the same day he'd arrested the FBI special agent in charge. "This isn't just a firing," Palmer said quietly. "You arrested a federal officer. That's a federal crime. The U.S. Attorney's Office will be reviewing this for criminal charges. You interfered with a federal investigation involving child abduction. You falsely arrested a federal law enforcement official, and you did all of it because you couldn't pick up a phone and make a 60-second verification call." Rebecca Santos, who'd been recording from her car, approached with her phone still filming. "I got the whole thing on video. The arrest, the sergeant arriving, all of it. Do you want me to send this to anyone?" Palmer looked at her footage showing him in handcuffs, a federal law enforcement official treated like a criminal on the side of a highway. "Please send it to this email address. It'll be evidence in the investigation." The video would be played in courtrooms, shown in training sessions, and used as the definitive example of what happens when bias and inexperience combine to override credentials, common sense, and basic verification procedures. Morrison stood there without his badge, without his weapon, his 73-day career over, facing federal criminal charges for arresting an FBI special agent in charge because he'd decided the credentials looked too official to be real, and the explanation seemed too detailed to be believable. Palmer got back in his Tahoe and drove to his office, arriving 32 minutes late because of a traffic stop that should have taken 5 minutes if Morrison had simply made the verification call Palmer had requested from the beginning. Austin Morrison was fired from the Atlanta Police Department within 48 hours of the incident, terminated before the investigation was even complete because the department understood that keeping him employed was legally and politically indefensible. The body cam footage showing him dismiss FBI credentials as fake, refuse multiple requests for verification, and handcuff a special agent in charge played on every news station, becoming the most clear example many law enforcement experts had seen of how rookie overconfidence combined with racial bias can destroy a career in a single shift. The federal charges came within 2 weeks. Morrison was indicted for deprivation of rights under color of law, false arrest of a federal officer, and obstruction of a federal investigation. His defense attorney tried to argue Morrison had been acting in good faith based on his training, but the body cam showed Palmer repeatedly asking for verification and Morrison refusing every request. The jury convicted him after deliberating for 90 minutes. He was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison with permanent loss of his law enforcement certification. Sergeant David Chen faced disciplinary action for failing to properly train Morrison on credential verification procedures, though he kept his job after demonstrating that the training had been provided and Morrison had simply failed to apply it. The Atlanta Police Department implemented mandatory training on recognizing federal law enforcement credentials and requiring verification calls before any arrest of someone claiming federal affiliation. The civil lawsuit Palmer filed wasn't for himself, but to establish precedent. The settlement of $2.8 million came with requirements that Atlanta PD create a database of federal law enforcement officials who regularly worked in the area, mandatory verification protocols, and consequences for officers who refused to follow them. The money went to organizations supporting criminal justice reform and law enforcement accountability. But the legal victories didn't restore what was taken. Palmer had been handcuffed on the side of a highway while coordinating a child abduction response, treated like a criminal despite showing legitimate federal credentials, and forced to watch precious minutes tick by while a case that needed his attention proceeded without him. The child had been recovered safely, but Palmer would never know if his absence during those critical 32 minutes had affected decisions or outcomes. He continued leading the FBI's Atlanta field office, but the experience changed how he viewed interactions between federal and local law enforcement. He became an advocate for better interagency coordination and training, speaking at law enforcement conferences about what happened to him and using it as a teaching moment about implicit bias and the importance of verification over assumption. His relationship with Atlanta PD remained professional but strained. Some officers were embarrassed by Morrison's actions and went out of their way to show respect and cooperation. Others resented Palmer for not handling it quietly, for filing federal charges that put a rookie cop in prison, for making the department look bad publicly. Palmer understood both reactions but refused to apologize for holding Morrison accountable. The case became required viewing in FBI training in police academies nationwide. New officers watched the body cam footage and discussed what Morrison should have done differently, how a single verification call would have prevented everything, how bias can override obvious evidence when someone has already decided what they're looking at. 3 years later, Morrison was released from federal prison to a life where he'd never work in law enforcement again. His LinkedIn profile described him as working retail security, a dramatic fall from the police career he thought was beginning when he pulled over what he assumed was just another distracted driver. Palmer still carried his FBI credentials in the same leather case, but now he also carried copies of the federal court ruling in his case and the Atlanta PD policy changes that resulted from it. When he got pulled over for minor violations, he presented everything immediately and waited to see if the officer would recognize his name or need verification. Most did their jobs professionally. Some didn't, and Palmer documented those interactions too, building a record of how federal law enforcement officials were treated during routine stops. The kidnapping case Palmer had been coordinating when Morrison detained him ended successfully. The suspect was arrested, the child was returned to her family, and the prosecution resulted in a conviction. But Palmer never forgot those 32 minutes when he should have been available to his team and instead was sitting in handcuffs because a rookie cop's bias was stronger than official federal credentials. The accountability was real and unprecedented. Morrison went to prison, his career destroyed on day 73. Policies changed across multiple departments. The settlement funded important reform work. But Palmer carried the knowledge that his 27 years of federal service and his position leading 400 agents meant nothing to an officer who decided a black man couldn't possibly be who his credentials said he was. He'd won every legal battle and achieved systemic change, but the cost was personal. The experience of being handcuffed on a highway during an active case, having his FBI badge dismissed as an online purchase, and learning that even leading a federal law enforcement office doesn't protect you from being seen as a suspicious first and credible second. Federal credentials dismissed as too official to be real. 27 years of service ignored in 73 days of bias. Some rookie mistakes in careers the same day they start. Share this if you believe verification should come before assumption. Subscribe to JPTV for stories where justice was served but scars remain. Drop a comment. How do we teach officers to verify before they assume? See you next time.